Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax, let me tell you a story. Today's story is called The Absence of Silence, written by Tracy Lee Thompson. A quiet unraveling of systems in a world that grew beneath. Let's get into it. There was a stretch of earth where every sunrise looked harmless, yet each dawn carried an invisible weight. Folk were told they lived in liberty, but their days were measured by a silent arithmetic. A plowman drove his blade through wet soil. Unseen ledgers carved a deeper furrow in his wage. A potter spun clay. A cent was shaved from every turn of the wheel. A widow laid a final flower on her companion's grave. Even parting carried a fee. Coins vanished before they clinked in a palm, and parchment stamped duty hung on cottage doors like hexes. Roads still cracked, roofs still leaked, but the collectors spoke of order and hope and the common good. Over the years, seasons stacked like tired ledgers, the folks noticed a pattern. The grand houses on the hill never felt the bite. Their chimneys puffed fat smoke. Their carriages crossed toll gates without pause. Laws bent around those pillars like reeds in the wind, while the humble were fined for the very dust on their boots. And yet the tithe kept its sweetest trick for last. It branded all questioning as ingratitude. You are protected, the pronouncements roared. You are represented. But the folks saw that protection walked arm in arm with privilege, and representation dined only at rich tables. So a hush fell across the land, less a silence than a gathering storm, not of revolt, but of clear sight. Eyes opened, trust cracked. And though parchments still arrived with every moon, the people now read them by a colder light, naming the game for what it was, a leash fashioned from ink, tightened with every breath, sold as a gift. The tithe had turned freeborn folk into tenants of their own toil, and that knowing was the first hammer blow against its chains. In those same valleys wanderers walked who somehow kept their shoulders light. They passed through gates, nodded to guards, paid what little was due, yet the tithe never drained their marrow. Villagers called them watchers, though no badge marked them so. The watchers had studied the tower's appetite and found its simple rule. Only what bears a name can be seized. Thus they crafted vessels, empty of blood yet rich with shelter. A garden sat inside one vessel, its harvest offered freely to any hand. A workshop lived inside another, foraging iron that brought grain, yet the coins touched no mortal ledger. Land, tools, even songs at the inn, all sailed beneath banners of trust. Guild companies, societies, each title woven from local law like reeds into a basket. You could count the reeds. You could never grasp the river running through. Gold traveled too, walking pathways the tower maps forgot. A silver shore where levies were light. An island whose rulers taxed only what docked overnight. A northern empire that slumbered when merchants spoke of grains that grew with patience. The watchers stepped lightly among these realms, letting each statute shield the next until pursuit became fog. At home they bowed, filled each scroll on time, spoke politely to clerks, yet every expenditure already wore a cloak of purpose. A meal was counsel, a journey was supply, a cottage corner was an office of ideas. The tower's ink found nothing soft enough to bleed. But the true strength of the watchers could not be charted at all. They traded craft for crop, tune for timber, care for cobblestone. No coin, no slip, only trust, as old as firelight. In that quiet covenant, the tithe had no mouth. One dusk a child asked how such freedom stood unbroken. A watcher placed a single seed on the child's palm. "This," the elder said, "feeds whoever tends it. Soil keeps no accounts." The child planted it, shared its fruit, and in that small circle the tower's reach ended. The great edifice of levee and ledger still looms, stone, cold, and certain. Yet on every horizon rise gardens, workshops, songhouses, all held by vessels with no pulse, yet endless breath. The watchers are not rebels, they are artisans of the unseen path, proof that a person may move within walls without ever being walled in. And wherever their tale is whispered, another seed drops into waiting soil. Currency the tower can neither tax nor tally, paid forward in quiet, sovereign of plenty. When the watchers had walked long enough, and the tower had grown fat off those still sleeping, a new pulse stirred beneath the soil. It did not shout. It did not march. It grew. From corner gardens and shared workshops, from whispered trades and rewilded minds, came a different kind of power, one not taken, but remembered. The people had once believed the power wore robes, held gavels, or issued fines, but now they saw clearly those masks were for fear. True power? That was growing your own medicine and knowing exactly when to pick it. It was feeding 3 families with food that never passed through a checkout. It was building shelter from materials no ruler could seize. It was healing without billing. It was teaching without licenses. It was thriving without dependence. And so they became sowers, planters not only of seeds, but of new patterns. They rewrote the meaning of work. Where once the people toiled to afford life, now they worked to build it. They no longer asked for permission to earn. They simply did what they were good at and trusted that value would return in kind. One forged tools and taught others to do the same. Another raised goats and traded milk for wool. A third painted symbols that opened hearts and marked thresholds. The market was no longer a place. It was a web. Each node strong, each thread built on trust, not law. They built beyond ownership. The tower had trained the people to hoard, to claim, to fence, to sign. But the sowers had seen how ownership invited chains. So they built in ways that no single hand could hold. A community well dug on common land. A solar array co-owned by neighbors. Workshops where everyone brought a tool and everyone walked out stronger. They held things in stewardship, not possession. What you own, the tower can tax. What you share, the tower cannot see. They became unaffordable to oppression. The tower had always relied on hunger. It counted on despair, isolation, debt. But the sowers, they had what they needed, grown, traded, taught. They could go weeks without touching its currency. They had medicine that didn't expire. They had warmth, shelter, story, and song, and none of it was for sale. When inspectors came, they found nothing to seize. When laws changed, the sowers changed their rhythm. When costs rose, the sowers simply turned inward, deeper into the village, deeper into the weave. They could not be priced back into chains. They raised children who would not bow. The tower still tried to teach its history, its glory, its grief, its laws. But the children of the sowers knew another curriculum. They knew how to gut a fish, read the sky, split wood, bake bread, and barter fairly. They didn't fear silence. They didn't fear darkness. They knew the stars by name, and they could carry a family's health in a bundle of herbs. and most dangerous of all, they had never once felt like property. No barcode shadowed their birth. No debt weighted with their first breath. They were unmapped by the machine, and that was the power the tower could not rewrite. And so the ground grew sovereigns. No thrones, no borders, no declarations, just circles, gardens in flame. The tower still loomed, but its windows began to go dark one by one, because its servants were no longer fed, because its power had been named, and so its spell began to fade. And in its place, laughter, trade, plenty. A people no longer asking what they were allowed to be, but choosing daily to be whole. No one toppled it. Most struggled to understand. The tower did not fall in flames or fury. It did not collapse beneath siege engines or chance. It did not end with a banner raised or a treaty signed. It ended the way a lie ends, when people stop repeating it. At first, it was simple things. Fewer carts on the toll roads, fewer coins passed in markets that once bled gold, fewer citizens asking questions at the clerk's windows, less traffic, less noise. A low hush settled across the ledgers, not from disobedience, but from disinterest. The people had simply begun to live elsewhere, in smaller circles, in handmade houses, in bartered trade and open sky medicine. They didn't burn the tax office. They just stopped going. The tower grew loud to hide its emptiness. It screamed of legality, of responsibility, of the greater good. It printed new rules, brighter warnings, sharper penalties. It sent men in crisp uniforms to knock on doors that no longer locked. But most of those doors were open to friends, not fear. And inside there was nothing the tower could use. What good is seizing a jar of preserved tomatoes? How do you find someone who doesn't keep a balance? How do you punish a network of people who already care for one another? The tower was still strong, still armed, still legal, but it was no longer needed, and that made it irrelevant. It tried to evolve, to stay alive. It tried to mimic what the people had made. It spoke of green initiatives. It promoted local resilience. It offered citizen partnerships. But the people had already built what the tower now tried to name, and they had built it without waiting, without asking, without charging fees. The tower was always late. It always would be, because it was chasing life, and life does not follow orders. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. A farmer teaching 10 others to grow food that never saw a store. A midwife who never filed a single report but delivered hundreds safely. A mechanic who rebuilt tools for trade, not profit. A musician who played for bread and was fed more than ever before. A child who never learned shame in the absence of grades or state standards. One by one, the pillars beneath the tower stopped supporting it, not because they were kicked out, because they walked away. The fuse. The tower's windows went dark room by room. One office shuttered, then another, then entire wings, floors, regions. No one rose to take it down. There was simply no one left inside. And when the wind finally howled through its hollow bones, the last guard at the gate stood there a while, unsure whether to lock the doors or follow the silence. Eventually, he did neither. He just walked home. No flags fell, no statues toppled, no epic songs of victory were sung. Just footsteps, back to soil, back to song, back to work that mattered. The tower stood still, a monument to a story that used to be true. Children asked what it was. Their elders would shrug. Something we once thought we needed, they'd say. Before we remembered, we were enough. This is how it ends, not with a bang, not even with a whisper, but with the sound of living elsewhere. And in the quiet that follows, only the hum of bees, the rustle of leaves, and the laughter of people who finally stopped renting their lives and started living them. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and follow, and I'll catch you next time.